Do you care to pay your respects?
Holy crap! You are creepy as
It's time for more Vagabond. Last time we ended on a big cliffhanger with the fate of Kohei being up in the air. So if you were excited to see what happens next, then too bad, because the story's going to cut away to years prior and a completely different set of characters. For a while too, considering this arc spans chapters 128 to 179, or volumes 14 to 20. So how does Vagabond fare, spending so much time away from the already established characters and direction? Well, let's find out. Vagabond has a thing for introducing characters with traumatic childhoods. Takezo and his abusive father, Inshun and the murder of his parents, and Kohei with his abusive family. But now we have this new character, Sasaki Kojiro, who is actually the third person that we've been introduced to so far that has that name, but this time he is the real deal. While Kojiro was orphaned as a baby, he does buck the trend of traumatic childhoods somewhat. Trust me, there are still some heavy things he has to deal with later on. Before we get to that though, I have to say that Kojiro is such a fascinating character to follow. Kojiro is deaf and mute, yet despite these limitations, he is able to overcome the challenges and prove he is a swordsman with almost limitless potential. Even from the time he was a baby, Kojiro found comfort in the blade. In a way, you could say that the way of the sword is a parental figure to Kojiro. Even when his actual father Jisai was refusing to train Kojiro, that never stopped him from teaching himself how to fight. This arc is a coming-of-age tale for Kojiro as we see different stages of his life and some of the events that shaped who he would eventually become. One of these being when he and his friend Tenki decide that they would save the town from a despicable swordsman named Fugo. Of the time when Kojiro met Yoshioka Denzichiro and was pitted against him in a fight for the amusement of a man named Ito. By the way, the more I see of Denzichiro, the more I think he might be my favorite character in the story. He may not be the most talented of fighters, but goddamn is he driven to succeed despite the odds being stacked against him time and time again. This opinion of mine was just solidified more strongly in this fight against Kojiro when he refuses to accept having a physical advantage over the boy, instead choosing to give himself similar restrictions in the fight that Kojiro has. Enough of fanboying about Denzichiro though, let's refocus on Kojiro. Time and time again, we see that Kojiro also has this beast-like nature in him, being described as a tiger wanting to be freed by Ito. It's so interesting to see how Kojiro differs from Musashi in this regard with the bestial nature. Musashi is being taught by those he meets to suppress the beast, instead being steered towards a more spiritual, zen-like approach to the sword. Whereas Kojiro is actually being encouraged to lean into the tiger inside of him, making it easier to unleash it during a fight. So it seems that Kojiro and Musashi are fated to cross swords one of these days. Two men that started out in similar places, but have taken different paths towards achieving the same goal. Kanimaki Jisai is introduced to us as a washed-up master swordsman. He was someone that fought tooth and nail to climb to the top, only to lose it all after being surpassed by Ito, one of his students. Jisai lived by the sword in such a way that it was literally everything to him. After falling from grace, he fell into a deep depression until one day he rescued a baby Kojiro from drowning in the ocean. This was the moment when Jisai had something to live for again, and he was determined to make sure Kojiro would not fall into the same pitfalls he did. As Kojiro grew up, Jisai tried his best to steer the boy away from the sword, but without much success. Try as he might, Jisai couldn't even escape his own history. On the day when Kojiro and Tenki went to defeat Fudo, Jisai was also there after being recruited by the villagers to be the one who would face the tyrant. Jisai's fight against Fudo is one of the most satisfying scenes in all of Vagabond to me. We have these two washed up swordsmen who have to shake off the rust or perish to the other fighter. Jisai, a man who was mocked and shunned by the villagers, would eventually become the man who saved them from the tyrant Fudo. Jisai, with his new form of wisdom, declined being made into the village's hero, fearing that he may eventually become a man just like Fudo. This is what I love about Jisai so much. He has years of experience under his belt, but also years of poor decisions that he regrets and has had to learn from. It is just so interesting seeing him struggle internally with deciding on the best way to raise Kojiro, whether or not he should allow the kid to train with a sword or not. Ultimately, that decision isn't made by him, as Kojiro eventually teaches himself with a little bit of help from Jisai's former student Ito. I liked how eventually, after Kojiro grows up and leaves home, Jisai still wants to honor Kojiro with a part of himself and sends Tenki to go find Kojiro so that he can give him a certificate for being a master of Jisai's form of swordsmanship. Which means that we now know that the man that Matahachi let die and stole the certificate from wasn't actually Sasaki Kojiro, but it was his childhood friend Tenki.
Oh no.
Damn it, Inoue, why do you gotta rip up my emotions like that? While Kojiro and Jisai were the meat and potatoes of the arc, there are a couple of other minor topics that I want to touch on briefly before we wrap up this review. Ito-sai, the former student of Jisai, is a fun instigator. If you need someone to create conflict, he is your guy. I really enjoy the way that Ito sees great potential in Kojiro and slowly steers him down the path to becoming invincible. It's thanks to Ito that the name Sasaki Kojiro has become a renowned title that Matahachi is able to use in the first place. I feel pretty confident that eventually the real Kojiro is going to get involved in a conflict with Musashi and Matahachi, and at some point it's probably going to be Ito that puts them against each other. But this does lead to a scene where we get a cameo from Takezo. It's a fun callback to the very first chapter of Vagabond where we see what led up to the opening panel of the story. This is also at a time where we get the introduction of some soldiers wielding guns. At least I think it was the first time we've seen that. And it paints a funny picture at how ironic a lot of Vagabond is, with so many of these characters like Musashi and Denzichiro devoting their entire lives to becoming invincible swordsmen at the same period of time where guns are coming into prominence, making swords obsolete. I think overall this portion of the story has done a fantastic job of really fleshing out a lot of the themes of Vagabond while introducing interesting new characters to follow like Kojiro and Jisai. I was afraid that we were going to be spending so much time away from our core group of Musashi, Atsu, and Matahachi, but I think it's going to be worth it in the end based on the setup we got throughout this arc. So if you have read Vagabond, what did you think of the Kojiro arc? Let me know in a comment down below. Or feel free to jump into our Discord server where I welcome any and all kinds of manga and anime discussion. Also, since we are starting to get into the second half of Vagabond, I'm now starting to think about what we're going to be doing next, and I think I'm going to be making a poll here in the community tab soon for you guys to decide what that's going to be. So make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on if you want a chance to vote in that poll. But that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your days, guys. Peace. Also, special shout out to the most recent member of the channel, XDouche360. Thank you so much for your continued support.